All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us virtually or in person. But my name is Jesse Wieland. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships. We also have.
Yes, I'm Bonnie Garcia-Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of National Fellowships.
And so we're going to talk to you about a few opportunities today, notably the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship. But before we get into all of that, and I will switch the slides, we're going to talk a little bit more about our office. So for those of you who have not been here before, so we're in the Honor Scholars and Fellows House, and right across the hall is where the Office of National Fellowships is on the third floor. And so we work with students for a variety of different fellowships, scholarships, opportunities, and we work with you through those application processes. And so whether it's through personal statements or statements of grant purpose, or really identifying your goals, or finding ways in which to write about those experiences, which can be really challenging for a lot of these applications when they only give you maybe 300 words or maybe a page at most. And so we work with you through those processes. And I should also probably talk a little bit about what a fellowship is for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time or hearing about our office for the first time. Normally, a lot of students can talk about what a scholarship is. We usually merit-based. You can apply for it if you get the funding. You can use it for books, fees, tuition. It's just here you go, congratulations, and that's it. When it comes to fellowships, regardless of which fellowship it is, they all have some sort of learning component or some sort of tangible outcome. It usually comes with that full funding, that merit-based, they review these applications. But at the end of your fellowship experience, you will have either learned something very specific, developed or created something, perhaps studied a foreign language, or whatever it is. But at the end of that experience, you'll have something tangible to show what you gained from that experience. And so we work with students with opportunities that are research focused, domestic opportunities. We work with students for international opportunities and experiences. And we work with students all the way from their first semester, their freshman year, up until their senior year, or even alumni and recent graduates. We also work with, we have our Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards upstairs, so we still work with graduate students as well. But with all of these opportunities, there is that level of competition, and they are national, they are selective, but that should never be a reason to not apply. And so by working with our office, we make sure that you're prepared and that your application is as polished as it can be before we hit that submit button. But already kind of talked about this a little bit, and so we're going to talk about some very specific opportunities today. But if you come into our office and you don't, this is relatively new for you, you haven't applied to these types of opportunities before, that's absolutely fine. Just based on some of the courses that you're taking or what you're majoring in, based on what your interests are or what you did in high school, or based on where you hope to go with your academic or professional future, we can help identify very specific opportunities that will help you explore those interests and passions. And so already mentioned, we work with you throughout that entire process. So it's not just revising and editing your essays. These applications usually have a lot of other components too, like letters of recommendation, for example. For some students, that can be kind of a new process in navigating that and asking and working with faculty and staff at Florida State to get those letters. And so we can coach you through that process. We also provide a space for you to sit and reflect and really critically analyze the experiences you've had both in high school, have had during your time at Florida State, and for students who may be juniors or seniors, really reflecting on the experiences you've had and how those intersect and how those have prepared you for what comes next after your time at FSU. Okay. Now to get into some of the specifics of why y'all are here. And so the awards that we're going to be talking about today are really a very small subset of the total number of scholarships, fellowships, and opportunities that we work with. And so you'll have our website at the end where you can go and explore. But for right now, we're just going to start with the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship, which is one of the programs that I lead at FSU. And so this opportunity is specifically recruiting Pell Grant recipients to pursue international study, international internships, and other opportunities abroad. And so the main mission of this organization is to recruit students, like I say in the PowerPoint, that might otherwise opt out. So that was, I guess, a very simple way to describe my undergraduate experience when I was at FSU. As a first-gen student myself, I got to Florida State and I was really focused on going to my classes, doing well in those classes, and then working off campus to afford those classes. And so I heard about study abroad, I heard about these different experiences, and my first reaction was, well, let me look at the price tag. And then immediately just be like, that's not me, I can't afford that, and just moved on. And so Gilman is looking for students like that would otherwise choose to just not go abroad or focus on other things. And it provides up to $5,000 for you to apply towards a program. And if anybody watching or attending this meeting is studying a foreign language, from that list below, if any of those languages are languages that you're interested in, you can also apply for what is called the Critical Need Language Award through Gilman and receive up to $8,000. And so we'll get into some of the other selection criteria and requirements, but for Gilman, regardless of what the opportunity is, and they have made some adjustments to accommodate for COVID and virtual learning. So some students have still been able to use their opportunity, their funding to go abroad. Other students have looked at a combination of virtual and time abroad, or just purely virtual programs. And Gilman's also very flexible for if you're a planner and whether you're wanting to go abroad for this summer, next fall, or next spring, Gilman allows you to apply well in advance to accommodate kind of some very rapidly changing circumstances. But regardless, it's up to $5,000 or up to $8,000 if you're studying any one of those languages to apply towards a program of your choosing. Just to quickly go over some of the eligibility requirements. So you do need to be a US citizen. And you need to be an undergraduate in good standing, but I will go ahead and tell you that's never been an issue for any student that's applied to Gilman in the past. If it happens to be a concern of yours, would love to sit down and talk with you about it. You do need to be receiving a federal Pell Grant at the time of application and during your time abroad, not just be eligible. And so that's something that I've worked with students in the past where that status has fluctuated or has changed. And so we can sit down and talk about that if that's something that you may be concerned about as well. And you don't, at this point, so to apply for Gilman, you don't necessarily need to be accepted into a program already. I know some of you may already be accepted into a program, and that's great if you are. We can just use that in your Gilman application. But to submit a compelling application for Gilman, you just need to have a good idea for where you want to go, what you want to do, and why you want to do it. Of course, you need to be aware of when that deadline for your program is, so you don't miss that application. So maybe it's probably going to be different from when Gilman is due, so just make sure that you're applying to both. And it needs to be in a country that is currently at a level 1 or 2, according to the US Department of State's travel advisory. And so that's been a very fluid, it's changed rapidly over the last few years for obvious reasons. But just hypothetically speaking, say if you're looking at a country that was currently a level 3, that is just a level 3 because of COVID, that's something that could change, but that shouldn't be a reason to not apply to that country, because if it does change to a level 1 or 2, say this summer or next fall, then you're going to be fine. If it does stay at level 3, then we can always talk about how to adapt your Gilman. So if you are awarded Gilman, you may not be able to use it to that country if it remains a level 3 or 4, but they're willing to work with you to either defer or to find another program that would accommodate their requirements. Okay. And of course, if you do have questions with anything that I'm talking about during this, please feel free to ask as we go along, or type it into the chat, because Bonnie is monitoring that. Would always like to take a moment to just pause and clarify. Now, when it comes to applying to Gilman and like the review process, so this is generally speaking what Gilman is looking for. So they're looking for students that, relative to the opportunity or experience that you're applying for, they want to see where in your transcripts or in your resume that you're qualified to engage in that opportunity. So they're looking for your academic or personal preparedness, and they're looking for how that opportunity is going to help you moving forward. So that could be moving forward with your time at Florida State as an undergraduate. That could be moving forward in your postgraduate experience, into your career, or moving forward into graduate school, perhaps. They're also looking for diversity of background and experience, and that is intentionally broad because they know Gilman applicants are coming from all sorts of experiences. They're looking to, because in one of the essays, which we'll get into later, they're looking for a combination of both your personal, like a personal statement, but also a statement of purpose, where you're going and what you're doing. And so they want to see the parts of your story of really amazing things that you've participated in or things that you've done. They also are interested in seeing maybe any challenges that you've overcome. And so they just want to get a little bit about your story so they can see where you're coming from. They're also looking at destination. And so Gilman has a preference for certain for programs in parts of the world that are not engaged with as much as they would like to see. And so there are locations within Eastern Europe, within Southeast Asia, or within the continent of Africa. If you have programs that exist in those areas, that's kind of like a little plus on your application. It's not a reason alone for why they would select you, but it is something that they consider. Now, if you're traveling to anywhere in Latin South America or Western Europe, that's absolutely fine too. They still select, the majority of selected students happen to be in those regions because just traditionally universities have more programs in those areas. In addition to that, they're also looking for the impact community. That we'll get into a little bit more with one of the specific essays that they're asking to write, but you have two different essays. One is the impact to the community in which you are going to, and the other is the impact to the community that you're coming back to. And so they're wanting to see how you're going to serve as that citizen diplomat during your time abroad. How are you going to be that positive representation of the United States? And how are you going to engage with the culture in the place that you're in? But then they're wanting to see when you come back, whether that's to Florida State, whether that's to your hometown or wherever that may be, how are you going to continue to share what you have learned or share the Gilman Scholarship itself with people who may not know about it? But regardless, you have essays that you'll be able to explore that. And then the last bit is only for students that are applying to programs that are studying one of those critical need languages from the list in the previous slide. So you have an additional, it's about like a third of a page. It's a really short essay, just really emphasizing why do you need to study this language? What aspects of this language maybe do you need to really grow in, whether that's field-specific vocabulary or whether, that's conjugating verbs, like whatever it is, they want to know, like, how do you hope to grow during your time in that program? Okay, so where to get started? So if you haven't been to Gilman's website, obviously I think that's the best place to start because they have a lot of resources, they have videos, they have podcasts, they have blog that you can access to learn a little bit about the opportunity, but also some experiences from previous alumni of the program. You can start taking a look and start planning for the essays and the writing components. Altogether, it's going to be roughly 3 pages of writing, about 2.5 pages of writing, which it's not that much when we start discussing all of the things that you need to include in your application, not just about your personal story, but about the program that you're going to, and also the community impact that we already mentioned. So go to Gilman's website, make an account, and start looking over all of those materials. Now, the next thing that you need to do is find a program. And so the best place to start is just going to look at what Florida State has to offer. So whether that's through international programs, whether that's through global exchange, global scholars, there's also Beyond Borders. There's a lot of programs that can provide the spectrum of experiences from your in-classroom academic study to your internships, to your research, or to just programs that are focused on cultural exchange. But regardless of what it is, we really want to be intentional that we're finding a program that really is going to help you grow and learn in a way that you want to, and it's not just a program because it's a program that exists. We want to make sure that it's going to help you grow in some way. So look through the resources at Florida State, but then I've also worked with students in the past that have found programs that are open to students from other universities, where you can go and participate in, like the University of Florida has a really excellent program to study Portuguese that I've had students apply to in the past. And so you can go through other universities' programs as long as it counts for credit here at FSU. And this last little bit is just to really emphasize the value of working with someone like myself or Bonnie or someone else in our office, is that getting that extra set of eyes on your essay and reviewing your writing is extremely beneficial. So for Gilman, you can apply entirely on your own. You don't need to talk to an advisor, but I have the numbers to back up that it's only about 20% of students that do that since 2016 are being accepted, whereas about 62% of students are being selected if you work with our office. And then even just over the past 2 years, we're seeing about a 90% acceptance rate for students working with our office. And that's for a myriad of reasons. COVID has complicated things, but so it may have decreased numbers overall, but that could be a reason for why you need to apply now and take advantage of this funding. Because like I've already mentioned, with the flexibility that Gilman has demonstrated, for a lot of our students over the last 2 years that have received it, they've been able to work directly with Gilman. If they weren't able to operate on the timeline they originally planned for, they've been able to defer to a later semester and been able to use their funding then. So long story short, come in and see us. We really want to work with you. Okay. So what is Gilman going to ask you to do? So it starts first and foremost with that statement of purpose essay that I already kind of mentioned is a blend between a traditional statement of purpose and personal statement. And so it's 7,000 characters that equates to about 1.5 pages single space. And that's where you're going to be able to, how I recommend to students is to begin your story, begin your essay with a little bit about your story. That can be some formative experiences. That can be something from your time in high school. That can be something from your time at FSU, but something that can get the reader's attention and then segue into the opportunity at hand. Where are you going? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Just give me as much information as you can about that destination and that program. And then we can wrap that narrative up by going back to something about your personal narrative, but in a way that's kind of thinking about the future. So where are you going as a result of this opportunity, whether that's at FSU or beyond? And so if we do that, the reader is going to get a lot about yourself and your story, and they're going to get a lot about the program and the opportunity ahead of you. Now, for the next 2 essays, that 3,000 characters is about half a page each single space. It can be difficult for students to tackle those for the first time, especially for some students who have never traveled abroad before. But talking about the impact, that building mutual understanding, that impact in the community that you're going to, that can be done through a lot of different ways. And so for some students, they think about some of the communities that they may represent during their time abroad. And why it may be important for them to participate in a program like this. Other students think about the culture that they're going to be engaged with and what they may want to do to further engage with that culture. And that's where you can bring in some of your other talents and skills and talk about how that would manifest in this opportunity. But regardless, they want to see how you're going to be that positive representative of the United States. And for the last essay, the follow-on service project, or the last essay for the majority of applicants, that's about half a page to talk about what you're going to do following your time with Gilman. And so the 3 things that I ask students to do in that essay is to identify a community or an organization that can be at FSU in your hometown or wherever you choose, but identify an organization, identify how you're going to engage with that organization, either through a presentation, through a talk, I've had students that have done art projects. And then the last thing you need to do is identify what's that impact that it's going to make, or what are those learning outcomes that you hope the people you're going to talk to or engage with are going to have following your presentation or talk, or again, whatever it may be. So if you can tell me who you're engaging with, what you're doing, and what you hope the impact will be, that's going to be a complete essay. And then the last essay, the critical need language, that's only if your program is focused on the study of that critical need language. You don't need any letters of recommendation, and we still have plenty of time to work on this application. It's not due until March 1st. But that's not a reason why we need to put it off. So we're always happy to get started with you early and start tackling this application and even get it submitted early if you already know where you're going and what you're doing. And so I already kind of mentioned, but this application cycle coming up is for programs starting May 1st, but it's through this next year. So if you're looking at a summer program, a fall program, a spring program, or a program that's an academic year that starts this coming fall, all of those can be eligible as long as the start date is within that range on the screen. Okay, and so now we're going to start talking about one more caveat award within Gilman, but then just briefly highlighting a few different opportunities that if you're interested in Gilman, you may be interested in some of these other ones as well. The Gilman McCain Scholarship is exactly the same as the Gilman Scholarship. The only caveat is that you need to be the dependent child of an active duty military member at the time of application. It's not Pell specific, but you just need to show that you have a demonstrated financial need. And so Gilman is going to, in the application, ask that directly. And so if you qualify for the Gilman McCain, that's what you would receive. But even for students that apply to the Gilman McCain Scholarship and may not receive it, they would still be qualified for the original Gilman Scholarship. And the same goes for the Critical Need Language Award. And so for students that write that additional essay, even if you're not selected for that up to $8,000 award, you'll still be considered for the base level Gilman, the one that's up to $5,000. The Freeman-ASIA Scholarship is also, it's very similar to Gilman in terms of what they're looking for. It just has that regional specificity. And so they're looking for, and I'll go ahead and skip to the next slide, because this one does have a length requirement. So for Gilman, your program can be, it can be 1 week, it can be 5 days, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 10 weeks, it could be a few months, or an entire academic year. They're pretty flexible. But for this one, I believe it's 8 weeks minimum for your program. Gilman doesn't have a GPA requirement. Freeman-ASIA does. And I believe this is just, you need to demonstrate financial need. It's not Pell specific. So very similar, but this one's not due until later in the spring semester. So we have a little bit more time than we have with Gilman. But if you're applying to a program in Southeast Asia, we can kind of hedge our bets a little bit and apply to both Gilman and Freeman-ASIA and hopefully receive one or the other, or perhaps both. Now, just to briefly touch on a few other awards, we do have another workshop coming up on January 19th at 4:30. That's going to be here in HSF 3008 or via Zoom. You can find that link on our website, and it's going to cover a lot of these awards in a little bit more detail. But just to briefly highlight those, the Critical Language Scholarship, it's very similar, but it's different from the Critical Need Language Award for Gilman. The CLS award is for a strictly summer opportunity, but it's for intensive language study. The languages are going to be the same as the CNLA award for Gilman. And so for some students, if you play your cards right, you could participate in multiple programs that would allow you to study that language. But CLS is usually due in early November. So that's one that's already passed, but it's one that we can plan for coming up. And the majority of the languages in that list require no prior study. A few of them do require a few semesters, but again, based on your interest, we can talk a little bit more about that in a one-on-one. Humanity in Action is a really cool opportunity that we're actually recruiting students for now. And so that's again for a summer opportunity, but that's focused on the study of human rights and social justice. They have a few different programs. They have about 4 destinations in Europe and 1 in the US. And where you're going to be placed is kind of dictate the curriculum that you study. But it's an international cohort that you're a part of. They have site visits. They bring in guest speakers, and the curriculum is really tailored to that city that you're in, the region that you're in. So it's a really cool opportunity. The Curtis Scholarship, that's another one for a summer program, but I believe it's a 10-day trip. If I'm getting my numbers correct, it's a 10-day trip to South Africa. And then it's also a week-long trip to New York City. And so it's focused also on human rights, but specifically for students that are interested in topics around hunger and extreme poverty and thinking of ways to alleviate those problems in our society, both on a large scale or a small scale. And so they'll fund, I believe it's around 8 to 10 students to go and engage with community leaders in South Africa who are actively working to alleviate poverty in their area. And then the opportunity that's going to be in New York City is for Global Citizen. It's their yearly conference that they allow you to attend because they fund the Curtis Scholarship. And then the last two, the Fulbright U.S. student program, that is for rising seniors. That's for up to a year abroad to either engage in research, academic study, or participate in an English teaching assistantship program. They operate in over 140 different countries, but if you're not a rising senior or soon to be graduating senior, that's one that we need to wait on a little bit. But if you're in your first or second year, we also work, yes.
So you mean by credits or by year for the senior?
By relative to graduation date. So for the U.S. student program, you need to have your bachelor's degree in hand to be able to participate or be a graduate student. But for the US-UK Fulbright Summer Institute, that's for first and second year students. So if you're a freshman or a sophomore, it's a summer program, whereas Fulbright is an entire year. But the summer institutes, they have 4 different ones operating this summer. That are going to be about a month long, and each one has an emphasis on cultural exchange. But in addition to that, each institute has its specific curriculum, its area of focus. So they have one that's focused on tech and innovation. They have another one that's focused on farming and agriculture and issues related to the environment. They have another on arts, activism, and social justice. And then there's a 4th one that in this moment I will forget, but you can find it on their website. And so if any of those opportunities sound interesting to you, the Humanity in Action, the Curtis Scholarship, and the US-UK Fulbright Summer Institutes are all ones we're recruiting for right now. And if you are a rising senior or soon to be graduate, we can also start talking to you about the Fulbright US Student Program, which we are also recruiting for, but we have a little bit more time there.
It's looking at a case-by-case basis too. So what we would do is assess how many credits do you have, but how much do you actually have left of your degree? So when we start assessing whether or not you're in your freshman, sophomore, junior year.
And so if you would like to go ahead and write down our contact information, both myself and Bonnie would be happy to meet with you. We also have our graduate assistant, Christine, who is not here today, but would also be happy to meet with you. And then our director, Dr. Filer, he also works with some very specific awards, a lot of the kind of upper echelon, like, senior year type of fellowships. And so we can always point you in his direction when relevant. And now I have time to briefly answer some questions that you may have about the scholarship, but we also have a couple alumni that I want to have join our conversation, share a little bit about their experience, and also take questions. So questions from either of you about the scholarship, or is there anything in the chat that we should talk about?
I got admitted into the international programs for FSU.
Congrats.
And thank you. And they're talking about deference. And I was wondering, should I defer if I'm going to plan on applying for the scholarship? Or should I just find something else, because there's FSU 4U and their international scholarships, and I don't even know when they're posting or how much money I'm getting from them.
Okay.
So exactly.
You already applied to those.
Yes.
Okay. And so what's the destination of the program through IP?
London.
Okay. And so they're asking you right now if you want to defer, I assume for the fall?
It's no, defer the payment.
Oh, defer the payment. Okay. Because it's $100 the down payment, or is it? Oh my God. Okay. Geez. So they haven't told you when they're going to post the FS4U scholarships.
FSU 4U scholarships are specifically announced, so they haven't told me when they're done.
Okay.
So the due dates already passed. They're submitted. Applied.
So
I don't know when they're coming out, if I get it in or not.
Right. So there is a bit of a waiting period associated. I mean, so Gilman is pretty fast, given that the deadline is March 1st and programs can start as early as May. And so usually if you give them about 4 to 6 weeks, that's usually the turnaround time for them to notify you if you've been selected. The FS4U, I assume those should come out soon, because I assume you applied back in the fall semester.
They just reduced by the 5th of January.
Okay.
That's one of the dates that was done.
Yeah. So I guess if there's no issue with deferring, if it's just deferring, it doesn't accrue any more cost, that could allow you a little bit more time to hopefully hear back from the FS4U scholarships, but then also to keep working on your Gilman scholarship. And while applying to any scholarship, it is selective, and there's a chance you may not be selected. With our numbers with Gilman the last 2 years, if you take the time to work on your application, work with an advisor, the odds of being selected, just judging by those few years, is very high. And so I would say if it helps you continue to save and wait to hear from a few scholarships to defer, then I might go ahead and do that. I guess that's what I would do. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Isabel wanted to know, are there any scholarships that are too late to apply to?
Some deadlines have definitely passed, yes. But I think depending on the program that you're applying to, the destination, or the type of experience, I'm sure we can find others. So I think typically, like, speaking for a lot of fellowships, the deadline to apply is going to be usually at least 6 months before that opportunity begins. So that usually equates to the semester before. In some instances, for like Fulbright and others, that can be almost like 8 months or more. But so yes, so some deadlines have passed, but not all deadlines have. So the two major cycles within our office for applications is going to be early fall and early spring. And so, so anywhere from late August until early November is a bunch of back-to-back deadlines. And then we have deadlines starting as early as January 15th or the 18th up until late March is when, so I think the Freeman-ASIA is due either late March or early April. So still plenty of opportunities. Yeah, so I think that's more of a reason for us to have a conversation now about what your interests are and what you hope to do to make sure that we don't miss anything else. But it also allows us to plan for next year. Any other questions?
Can you like define really what you really meant by like level 1, level 2? Is that like just COVID related, or?
It's so it's kind of an accumulation of a lot of things. And so if you just go to Google and you just type in U.S. Department of State Travel Advisory, it's going to take you right to that website. But a level 1 or 2. So most countries right now that are in any given year, like a level 1 or 2, have been kind of bumped up to like either a 2 or 3, just purely because of COVID. There are other situations where either just from conflict in the region or some political unrest that can be a level 3 or 4. And so if that's the case, it wouldn't qualify for Gilman, but we can find other programs for you. So I think you said you're going to Italy, which in most years is that level 1 or 2. I think the only reason Italy would be a level 3 right now would be because of COVID. And I believe if you were to receive Gilman, you would need to at least, I think it's 5 weeks prior to your departure, it would need to come down to a level 1 or 2. But that's something that we can definitely talk more about. But if you go to the website, you can just search the countries and find yours and if it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah. Other questions? If not, we can go ahead and I know we have at least one of our panelists here. I know the other one is going to be joining us very shortly, but let me go ahead and stop the share. Oh, well, speak of the devil. Perfect. All right, Arya, Nina, if you would like to unmute yourself. Hello. Good to see you.
Hi.
Perfect. And so let's have both of you briefly introduce yourself, and then I would say talk a little bit about your experience with Gilman.
Okay, so hi, my name is Nina Perdomo. I major in, oh wait, okay.
I'm turn the volume up. It's, what is it? Okay, well, let's see, maybe it is under, we're using the wrong speaker. Nina, could you try one more time?
Yeah, how's this? Hello, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Hey, there we go. Okay. Sorry.
Yay. Okay.
Brief delay, but please take it away.
Yeah, okay. So hi everyone. My name is Nina Perdomo. I am a senior here at FSU. an undergraduate senior. I double major in classical archaeology and Italian, and I minor in anthropology and English. Should I speak a little bit about my experience?
Sure, I would say go ahead.
Okay, so I received the Gilman Scholarship in the spring, the year of 2020, which is the COVID year. I had planned to do an excavation in Italy for my classical archaeological studies, but because it was the COVID year, Italy was, I think, level 3 or 4, so it was not possible to go. And because of that, Gilman allowed me to defer my award. So I waited, and in between that time, I actually managed to get a different scholarship, and I got to go to Italy and do some museum work through the FSU Florence program, the international program. And then I came back and used the Gilman scholarship to tutor students at a university in Italy remotely. And so basically it's a whole convoluted circle, but basically the message is that even with COVID, I got to have the preparation through Gilman. I had a really good application for my second scholarship because of the Gilman. It prepared me. I used my essay, so I was confident enough to apply for that second scholarship, go to Italy, get the experience that I wanted, and then come back and do even more with the Gilman funding. So yeah, COVID was not fun, but it didn't completely destroy my Gilman experience.
Thanks, Nina. Arya, would love to hear.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Arya Holden. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a alum of Florida State University. I graduated in May 2020. When I was there, I was an anthropology major. So similarly to Nina, who was doing classical archaeology, there is some overlap. And you also mentioned minoring in anthropology. I did my Gilman experience in the summer of 2019. So the summer before my senior year, and of course before the pandemic, so things do look a little different, but I am currently a Gilman alumni ambassador, so I'm still a part of the Gilman family, the Gilman cohort. I just now more so work with people on their applications, deciding where they want to go, how they're going to cultivate their story, all that good stuff. When I was there, I was in Vietnam. I was there for about 4 months, and I went through the Global Scholars Program at Florida State University. I don't know if it's still something that's going on or what it looks like now because of COVID, but traditionally it was an opportunity for you to work for a nonprofit somewhere around the world for at least 8 to 12 weeks, and then cultivate a project based on a specific subject or topic that you learned about in that area. So for me, I was working on research about ethnic minority single mothers and their experiences in Vietnam. And I was also teaching English while I was there. And I was able to get other funding alongside Gilman, such as the IDEA grant, which really helped with my research. And I had funding from Global Scholars specifically because I was a care student. But overall, I thought it was a very transformative experience that really helped solidify whether or not I wanted to go into something more long-term international, such as the Peace Corps. But of course, with the pandemic on hold, I was not able to pursue that. And I'm currently applying for other fellowships and scholarships, such as Princeton in Asia, which I have an interview for. So yay, Jesse helped me with that application. Volunteers in Asia, which I had an interview for. So yay, Jesse helped me with the application. And Fulbright, which I have not heard back from yet, but I should hear back from soon. So that's my experience.
Fingers crossed. Can both of you briefly speak to the application process and what approaching that was like for the first time? Because Nina, I think when we started, at least, I don't think COVID was a thing yet. So maybe it was still a little different, or had it?
Yeah, everything was normal. Normal.
Yeah.
When I first started meeting with Jesse and working on my essays and everything like that. And then I remember it was like, it started in Italy and I was like, oh, it's fine. It'll be gone by the time it's summer. And then it wasn't. But yeah, it was the essay writing and everything was really interesting to do. And it was fine because I had the help of Jesse. So I really highly recommend going to get help when you write your essays and everything like that. And Gilman was very responsive with the whole COVID situation. They, everyone was freaking out because no one knew what was really going on. They responded to emails, phone calls. They're very receptive. And they were just really nice about letting us defer our scholarships. So in case, something you know, heaven forbid, but in case something does go worse, you know, Gilman will plan, and they were really effective, at least in my experience.
For my essay experience, it is a little different than what the application is now. I know that when I applied, there were 2 essays, and now one of those 2 essays have split into 2 other essays for a total of 3 essays, but essentially the same content. But I kind of like that there is this kind of split, because you do have a little bit more room to write about what you need in those 2 essays versus trying to cram it all together into 1 essay. So for my writing experience, of course, I worked with Jesse. I've been working with Jesse throughout my undergraduate career and now as an alumni. And I think the biggest thing for me was learning how to write your story in a way that you wouldn't have necessarily supplementary material to back you up. Like, you don't have a letter recommendation, for example, for the Gilman. So it's one of those things where you are essentially creating your own story and showcasing what you want to tell them without necessarily having those other things. Like, yes, your transcript is there, but for example, your GPA does not impact whether or not you get a Gilman scholarship. So it's not like it's necessarily helping you and creating like, oh, why I'm this ideal candidate. So I think that big thing was making sure that my story reflected who I was, but also who I wanted to become through the Gilman experience. And I think that was a very important thing to learn, because as I finished undergrad and started applying for other things, and especially if you do want to pursue grad school, you really need to know how to talk about yourself in a way that gets the point across. And Jesse knows I'm not great with being concise. I'm not a concise person at all, but it gets your point across in a way that reflects who you are, at least on paper. And I think Gilman was a great practice for that for future applications.
Could you both speak to what was the most challenging aspect of your time abroad? Knowing that both of you went during very different times, but and to very different places. But what were some of those challenges, and how did you meet those?
Well, when my time abroad, it was for a different experience, but so my time physically in Italy, it was during the COVID pandemic. So it was when I got to Florence, there was no tourism allowed. It was just, us students had specialized admission to get into the country. So it was just the local people. And so it was very much, all my interactions were with, you know, actual local Italian people. So it was interesting having to, you know, speak Italian every day on a regular basis. And then also learning about the COVID guidelines over there. They have like very different mask regulations. All their regions have different COVID levels. There's just a bunch of different rules. So for people going abroad this year to level, you know, 1 or 2 countries, there might still be COVID restrictions. So making sure, you know all the rules and everything like that, so you don't, you know, accidentally get fined like 500 euros for not wearing your mask or something like that, which I know actually happens. So things like that. And then my virtual experience with the Gilman scholarship, which is when I tutored students remotely, it was another interesting experience, because now instead of speaking Italian, I was teaching English to Italian college students. So that was just a really good experience. I like teaching. I really liked this different classroom level, instead of being a student actually giving information. So that was just really interesting, and learning how to communicate and teach effectively was fun for me.
My experience was before COVID, so I could imagine that with COVID, I would have a different scenario or a completely different experience that I think with my experience before COVID, it would just have added on to it. So where I was in Vietnam, I was in northern Vietnam. I was in a rural area that was majority ethnic minority. And the reason why I was placed there was partly because of my research. Like, the organization I work with, Coins for Change, which was an organization founded by a single mother, first single mothers and other marginalized women, really took notice of why I was there and why I wanted to pursue the research I was pursuing, and really helped place me in an area that would be useful for my research. So I was in a rural area, and I also lived in the school that I taught in. So I didn't necessarily have any issues with like transportation regarding going to class, but being there, the school opened in 2019, early 2019. I was there summer 2019. So I was one of the first Americans. So I went with another American that also took or was also in Global Scholars. So we were the first Americans. I was the first ever Black person that taught there. So that in itself was a different experience. I had students that were very shocked to see me, students that were very afraid to see me, students that were very intrigued to see me. So there were a lot of differing reactions, which I think would not have changed if I were to go via the global pandemic. I think the only issue would be, of course, that it would be COVID-19 and the pandemic coupled with the fact that I am this very, very visibly foreign person in this new area. So I think that was a big challenge for me. I think on top of that, I did not know Vietnamese going to Vietnam. I took about almost 3 years of Mandarin in at Florida State, but none of that was useful at all for Vietnamese. It's a completely different language. There are more tones. The writing system is Latin based because of the French history that they have, but it is completely different from how we would pronounce the words in English. So that wasn't really helpful. I did have the help of my host mother and father. I lived with the host family, and they were helpful in getting things like my phone set up, helping with translations, knowing where to find the food at the market. So that was very, very instrumental for helping me stay there. But I think overall, the hardest part was being someone that you wouldn't typically see in this part of the world or this part of the country. And I think that was something that really shocked and stumped a lot of people, but it opened up some interesting conversations. Like I had one student ask me why I was Black, and I had to explain that in a way that I was hoping she would understand, because I can't go into African ancestry and the history of human beings and human groups and genetic and phenotypical structures. So I'm I can't go into all of this. You're 11, but I can try to at least explain sort of why I look the way I look. So that was very interesting. And I think if I were to go during the pandemic, that would have also been there along with everything else that Nina has talked about regarding protections from COVID-19.
I have a couple more questions, but I don't want to hog up too much space. So I want to make sure that if anyone in attendance right now would like to ask any questions, we can always come back to mine. Yeah.
I heard you did the IDEA grant. How did the Gilman exactly specifically help you apply for the IDEA grant and help continue your research?
Yeah, so I applied for Gilman before the IDEA grant, and I feel like my Gilman experience, so it was interesting because I was applying for Gilman and Global Scholar at the same time, not knowing if I would get either. So it was just me applying with the hope and the desire that this would work out and things would just kind of fall into place in a sense. So when I was applying for the IDEA grant, which had a deadline a few months after the Gilman, I knew I received the Gilman in December, and the deadline for the IDEA grant that year was in February. So I think with my Gilman, status, I didn't necessarily mention that in the application, but I did mention that I would be going to Vietnam. And I think the fact that I was doing a research project that had an international lens, I think because I was doing a research project that was different than the typical IDEA grant applicant, I think that helped me stand out. So if you are interested in pursuing research, especially if you are trying to couple it with your Gilman experience, really highlight that cultural importance, not only for Florida State, but internationally. What would your research do for this community that you are working with? What would your research benefit from having your perspective there, right in that community, versus researching it online or finding out information via someone else? How would you benefit from that? And I think that would be the most important place to start when it came to that. Because I know with the IDEA grant, there were other people that also went abroad internationally, but I think my location was also important because there weren't that many people that went to Southeast Asia. And I think having those underrepresented parts of the world, such as Southeast Asia, the continent of Africa, Oceania, those locations that typically people don't go to, was another advantage. So I think that was helpful for the IDEA grant. Did I answer your question? I hope I did.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's more, my question is more research based, not a scholarship. So,
Would you like to ask that question?
Oh, I want to start doing research, but everyone that I get information from is pushing it to the fall. Exactly how did you start with your research? And it was needed for the IDEA grant.
Yes. So I originally started research at Florida State via Europe, and I'm pretty sure many of you have heard of Europe. And this research project I started was entirely from scratch and entirely from an idea where I was thinking, okay, I'm going to this location. I know I was raised by a single mother most of my life. What is their lives like in this new location I'm about to go to and visit? And basically the community I'm working alongside, what is that experience like? So I think my research project just started with that idea. And I know that when it comes to the idea grant, they do need it to be a little bit more fleshed out. But what I started was I had a professor at the time that was teaching race and race relations in the sociology department. And I thought, oh, this person could be a great person to be my PI and a great person to kind of help guide my project. She was also in the Department of Demography at the time. So she was really fantastic with like the quantitative and qualitative elements of research and what was needed for that. So finding that professor was important because once I found them, it really helped lay the groundwork for how I could prepare this proposal. On top of that, I found former idea grant recipients that went to somewhere else outside the United States, not necessarily Vietnam, but I found someone that was awarded an idea grant to go to Brazil. And I talked to them extensively about how they formulated their project and like how realistic it was for them to do certain things. So talking to other people is fantastic, like what you're doing now. I can always talk to you about it more. But I think the biggest thing is making sure that you have a faculty member somewhere on campus that can help support you through this endeavor and finding out if your steps are realistic given a former student's experience via the idea grant. And of course, talking to CRE, ONF, all those individuals to help formulate your application.
Yeah, so I have questions, but I have class soon, like I have to go.
Yeah.
So like, is there a way, like if I could email one of you and then like I could get like emails from them to ask more questions?
Yeah, I unfortunately pester Arya way too often and forwarding students your way. Yes, these two wonderful examples for Gilman, but we also have other examples dependent on the location that you're going to that I would love to put you in contact with. Okay. And so yes, not to speak for anyone else, but we have people we can put you in contact with. Yeah. But also feel free to head out. I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I was curious, do you still like have a good recollection of being able to speak Vietnamese?
My Vietnamese is so rudimentary and so flawed, but they really tried with me. I remember one of the English teachers, I was trying to say like, I am Arya. So I was trying to say like, lo doi Arya. And like, every time I said that, she was like, no, not lo doi, lo doi. And I'm like, I'm saying it. I'm saying what you're saying. It's different. So it was definitely a fun time trying to learn Vietnamese. I think it was difficult learning it as someone that was teaching English because you're surrounded by English. People are talking to you in English. Your students are expected to talk to you in English. So it was really important I dedicate time outside of the classroom to learning Vietnamese and making sure that I had some way of making sure other people understood me. Because I think the biggest thing is they don't expect you to speak, at least someone that looks like me, they don't expect someone that looks like me to speak Vietnamese. So as soon as I try, they're like, just say it in English. So it's definitely one of those things that I have like very vague memories of because I started to learn Mongolian when I thought I was going to Peace Corps via Mongolia. So I have very vague recollections of Vietnamese, but not a lot. I could not hold a conversation. I'm sorry about that.
I think just what helps with that, I'm trying to learn German and Japanese, and what helps is looking at videos about how they talk about where to place your tongue. Because I have such a hard time with the R, but someone told me to try gurgling and saying it. That really helps.
That's fun. Something I would like to hear from both of you, and I know we're running low on time, and I think this is partly because Nina, we just very recently talked about it, but can you talk a little bit about how your time abroad has either impacted your future goals or your interests or just your academics or just some of what you've done, and I know Arya have a little bit more separation from your time with Gilman, but can you just talk about the time abroad and how that changed what you wanted for yourself?
Yeah, well, just applying for Gilman, I had never really, it was my first scholarship application. So just applying and going through the essay writing process and everything made me confident enough to apply for the other scholarship that allowed me to go to FSU Florence International Programs. So just that, that really helped me a lot. And now I'm applying to graduate schools and applying to more things. So just the Gilman Foundation, it's such a good place to start. And now for my time abroad, oh, sorry, my audio went out. But for my time abroad, it really changed everything for me. It's a perfect question for you to be asking me, because I was geared more towards classical archaeology before going abroad. And then while I was there, I did museum work, which I liked so much that now I'm applying to graduate schools for museum studies. So it actually completely changed my career path. Classical archaeology is very white male dominated. And so my Gilman application was, I'm a Hispanic immigrant. I was born in Peru and I moved to the US when I was smaller. And so I have been wanting to make an impact in academia because there's such a lack of representation of minority groups there. And the same kind of goes sometimes for museum studies. So my experience there, I liked it so much. I saw what it was like to be in the field and it changed my career path. And then when I got back and I did the teaching, the virtual teaching, I liked it so much that I'm like, oh, maybe I could apply for TA positions and everything like that. And because I applied for Gilman, because I have my essays and everything like that, I'm like, okay, I feel ready and I feel confident enough. If I never would have applied for Gilman, I don't even think I would be applying for museum studies or doing maybe anything that I'm doing today. So yeah, it pretty much changed a lot for me in the best way possible.
I think my Gilman experience overall helped solidify that I was a capable candidate for things I wanted to pursue. For a long time, and like Jesse knows this, I've known about Gilman since my freshman year, and I didn't apply until my junior year because I just did not think I would be qualified, did not think I would be capable. And I think after being awarded the Gilman and other grants and scholarships, I felt more confident in my abilities to pursue other applications, Fulbright being one of those, because I mean, as Jesse knows, I was also like, no, I don't think I'll be a good candidate. No, I don't think they'll choose me, which is not necessarily the point of these applications. I mean, yes, you want to be chosen. Of course, you put in the work, but it's also about learning how to understand yourself and your story and applying it to a setting where people do not know you, but maybe want to get to know you through your application. And I think that was something that helped me when I applied for other things, such as Americorps. I'm currently an Americorps member, and Americorps is not military service, it is national community service. So it is, I think of the domestic Peace Corps. So I'm doing that at the moment, but I think with my Gilman experience, it helped solidify that I want to live abroad longer term. I would love to do a master's in Norway, for example. And I think having that Gilman experience really helped show that I have the capability of living in an international setting. And I think another thing too is that it really helped solidify my goals for graduate school and wanting to have a more multicultural lens, similarly to what Nina said, like anthropology is a white man's game. It is. So it's one of those things where I definitely see that there might be obstacles, but because of my experiences in Vietnam, I know that I have the capability of overcoming them. And I think you would see the same thing too in your experiences wherever you may go. So I think that was something that really helped solidify why I continue on the path I did, which is hopefully going to be going international again this year. Fingers crossed that these interviews go well. So let's hope, but that's what I learned from it.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hearing your perspective, and I know that'll be very valuable for our students. I hate to cut the conversation short, but unfortunately our room reservation has run out. but for any students that have any questions that were able to attend today, either in person, virtual, or just registered for this, because I'm going to send this out to them. If they have any questions, if you're both welcome to it, I can always forward those your way. But thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody. Happy New Year.
Good luck, guys.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for joining. Yeah. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I always have my business card if you would like my email. I know you came in just a little bit late, but
I was on the Zoom.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to hear from you soon. So, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'll see you.